Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland, the podcast, gamecast edition. I don't know what we're going to call this, but this is, I guess, I don't know, a new version of a gamer, except for hopefully a little more entertaining than the same old stuff you've been getting from, I don't know, every site talking about doubles that score runs and blah, 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 when most of you probably watch the game anyway. So hopefully we can give you a little bit of insight starting today for whenever Mike or I have a gamer at WFNY. Hopefully you'll see some of these podcasts cropping up. And who knows how regular they'll get if we can crank these out in 15 minutes or so. Maybe you'll see more and more of them if you're listening to them. So that being said, the Indians played Houston tonight. Pretty big series early in the year. Mike Hattery, they lost 4-2. I don't know that it was necessarily a surprise, being that they were facing off against lefty Dallas Keuchel, one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. And, of course, the Indians have had a historic amount of trouble. I don't know, historic's not the right word, but this year seemed to have a lot of trouble with lefties, in particular this one. Any thoughts on the game? There are a couple of key points to me. Obviously, that Reddit catch on Kipnis and Yan Gomes throw into right kind of set the tone for the game at different points. But what are your initial thoughts on this? And what do you think about Josh Tomlin finally getting turned into a piggyback pitcher?
Yeah, I thought the Indians were really lucky to stay in this game. Truthfully, early I thought Tomlin's usage was pretty aggressive third time through the order. I mean, he danced out of pretty big runners in scoring position issues in the fifth and the sixth while still allowing 3 runs. I thought he probably should have been done after the fifth. Couple of interesting usage points to me with a 3-1 game in the 7th and 8th inning. Francona went to Nick Goody. Big fan of his. I think he's a really interesting pitcher. But pretty bold usage of a guy who didn't make the team out of spring training in a close game against perhaps one of the other best teams in the American League. So I think that's something to definitely consider. And he sent him in for the 3-4-5 in the 7th, which seemed like really bold usage. Obviously, the play in center was huge with Josh Reddick. I guess we have to talk about I think one of the more striking things is that the Indians probably are the winners of this game in that they didn't see their all-star second baseman have a awful collision, which might have caused a concussion. So all things aside, it's just a loss. We can move on.
Yeah, well, the interesting piece, they brought Goody in, and it seemed to be, that's the Brian Shaw spot there. And, we didn't see Otero there. I know Shaw pitched recently, but of course they had an off day yesterday, so it was quite a surprise. He ends up giving up a run. It wasn't an earned run, and then Miller was on the hill when he gave it up. Miller came in the game and gave up 2 hits. I know it's early in the year, Mike, and you know how I feel about bullpens, and Andrew Miller is obviously one of the best relievers in the game. He has looked less than perfect, and I guess for a guy who looked so perfect last year and in years past, is this a concern? Is this a trend that you're worried about at all? He is giving up more hits than he's used to. He still looks great, don't get me wrong. Or is this just a case of the Indians playing an elite team, or is there maybe a little dent in the Andrew Miller armor?
I'm not worried. It's early. It's really early. He's given up a little more hard contact, but he's still getting tons of swing and miss. He's not walking dudes. He's obviously had less swing and miss in the past, but we have an 8-inning sample. And to me, it was just a weird usage tonight. They got him up quickly. He came in a strange situation, and Gomes throws the ball down the right field line. So I don't really know. I think, in that situation, that's sort of like from watching the postseason where we expect him to just go in and strike out 2 dudes and it not be a problem at all because he's broken. And so maybe there's a chink in the armor, but I don't have reason to believe that yet. So I'm gonna remain where I am. He's still been really good.
Yeah, he did throw 9 strikes out of 11 pitches. That's still pretty good to me. I guess probably my biggest concern with the Indians, and I'm not really concerned about today's loss in so much as the fact that Houston is one of the best teams in baseball, if not arguably the best team in baseball right now. Obviously, the Astros are probably a team we're looking at as the year progresses as being kind of the contender for that top spot in the AL. As we still hard for me to think of the Houston Astros as an American League team, but incredible young talent with the added bounce of signing Reddick long term and also signing Carlos Beltran. Good youth there, although the Altuve kind of injury potential there and Hernandez as well. I looked a lot more serious, and of course he's not as big a piece as Altuve, but that obviously another big point perhaps in the season for Houston. Should that go further than just today? Let's talk Yan Gomes, Mike. He had that kind of CNI single earlier in the game. Still looks pretty dreadful at the plate. How long do we go with Yan Gomes as the primary starter for this team? If you go back to March when we were talking about, actually February when we were talking about the catching position, it was our first positional preview. We were pretty steadfast then, before Gomes looked so dreadful coming out of the gate, that the Indians would be about 50-50, perhaps leaning towards Roberto Perez as a starter. Here we are, nearing the end of April. Gomes, whose hitting is atrocious right now, and while his defense has been fantastic, to be perfectly honest, and while he's been framing very well, I can't imagine that the Indians front office and even the Indians field management think that he's a better defender than Roberto Perez. How long do we go before Roberto Perez takes over as the primary starter? Do we ever see that happen? And how long do we go before this actually hurts Roberto Perez as an offensive player? We talk about people needing regular at-bats. Doesn't it seem like Roberto Perez might be the candidate who needs a little bit more at-bats than, I don't know, once or twice a week?
Yeah, I mean, he's really good at controlling the strike zone, so I think he's not going to hurt you if you're hitting him a lot more often. For a guy they just signed an extension to this offseason and looks to be here longer than Gomes. I know the guaranteed money is lower, but I've really been shocked how lightly they've used Perez, especially with Gomes' struggles. I mean, Gomes, he doesn't walk, okay? Like Gomes, like he either like makes a lot of really good contact and gets good BABIP outcomes, or he doesn't, and he's not getting those. And there's some reason to believe that like his contract profile has sort of forever decreased since he got injured. Whereas like Perez, like the downside to him is he's going to work a pitcher a ton at the bottom. You're going to see everything. And maybe he'll certainly run a higher on base percentage. So I sort of don't, maybe he doesn't have the power upside, but I just think the quality of at-bats he provides to this team are so much more valuable, where like, to me, it should be like a 60-40, 70-30 Perez split. And we're seeing it the other way. I don't really get the patience with Gomes at this point. I love the guy. I would love to see him succeed, but I think the patience really should be wearing thin. He looks lost. He happened into a single that fell in right field because two guys almost killed each other. I think the Indians have really been much more, I don't know. I can't believe how much trust they've had in Yan Gomes at this point. I know the team loves him, but
well, I mean, and obviously, again, it's a complicated move in that obviously Gomes has a great relationship specifically with a couple of starters, Corey Kluber in particular, but Roberto Perez has a similar relationship. I mean, is this one of those things where Francona is just sticking with his guy, or is this just a manager trying to give Gomes as many at bats as possible to kind of find his way? My question is, when you make that shift, what do you do with Gomes? Do you keep him as your backup, or do you try to get him right? He's got two options remaining. I mentioned this in a piece, and I wasn't really being sarcastic. I mean, could he be at some point a potential send down to Columbus to try to get that bat right, to try to get his head on straight?
Yeah, he could be. I mean, I don't know what else they have to try to get his head straight. Part of the game does just look mental with Gomes offensively, but I just think this is a guy who had a profile that was really going to be prone to breaking. This is a guy who, when he was playing really well, didn't walk out, struck a below league average amount. He's striking. He's just a guy who's going to strike out a decent amount. And if he loses any contact authority, then he's just sort of sapped offensively as a player. And I think that's what we're seeing with Gomes. Even if you get this guy right, which I'm not sure what right even is for Jan Gomes anymore. I just don't know if he's a much better offensive player than Roberto Perez. So I think, try whatever the hell you want, but I want to see more Roberto Perez while you're trying it.
All right, so we'll kind of wrap up to talk about today's game. I mean, Jose Ramirez looked fantastic. Probably while he went 2 for 4, the most impressive piece to me was the slide over and the shift. He makes a fantastic play, flips the ball to Lindor and then they almost turn a double play off that. How spectacular I know we're the Jose Ramirez homers here, and between the two of us, we've written about 247 pieces, of which you've written 242 of them on Jose Ramirez. But beyond that, like, Jose Ramirez is having not even a subtle spectacular season. I think that offensively, obviously, we're seeing a lot of the same from last year, but in particular, I think we're seeing this defensive side to Jose Ramirez a lot more consistently than in the past, and in a lot more different places. I mean, I hate, it sounds like we're banging a drum here, Mike, but what is the ceiling for Jose Ramirez? And I know we talked a little bit about this in our last not a lot about this in our last podcast, but can we even recognize what the ceiling is for Jose?
I mean, I think the ceiling's Jose Altuve. So, I mean, I'll throw that. I think we know what it is, but I think he has such good barrel control. Like, you look at his 2 PAs and he fights off Keuchel. Both times he gets a pitch outer edge. He doesn't try and pull the ball. He just sort of stays on it and drives it to the opposite field, leveraging the barrel. And I just don't think many guys can do that. It's special. And this is a really good dude who shut down the whole Indians lineup except for Jose and Austin. And yeah, I mean, I guess Michael Brantley run into the biggest hanging curveball you've ever seen in garbage time. But I think the way Ramirez handles the bat head is just incredible. And defense is something else too. So we can bang the drum a lot because he deserves it.
Yeah, well, and you made an interesting point in your piece yesterday, Mike, talking about kind of that undersold value of where he can play and the positional value that he has, because he can play literally 3 infield positions at plus value, and who knows what he can do in the outfield if you give him some time out there. So I'm curious to see if we can, at some point in the next 3 or 4 years, as Ramirez kind of works his way through his career, ultimately probably moving to second base. I mean, who are we kidding? It'll be interesting to see if we can find a metric that kind of adds value to his career, thanks to that ability to play multiple positions. You mentioned Austin Jackson and Michael Brantley. I'll kind of end it there. Austin Jackson, to me, is one of the best stories of the Indians this year. I mean, obviously, we're finding a ton of value in this guy for however long he gives us that value. Is it possible that Austin Jackson can last throughout the year playing plus baseball? Is it possible that we've hit a goal line with him, as they've done so many times in the past, with both offensive players and pitchers as well? Could we have found that diamond in the rough? That's one. And two, Mike, as we kind of wrap up today's talk on today's game, before we look ahead to tomorrow's game and look at the minors a little bit, what about Michael Brantley and that power? I mean, he keeps showcasing it. Was a hanging curveball, but he's showing he looks exactly like the old Brantley. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's driving the ball really well. So talk a little bit about Austin Jackson, talk a little bit about Michael Brantley, and then we'll focus a little bit on tomorrow's game.
Okay, so on Austin Jackson, a lot of positive returns so far. One concern, he looks slow as hell. Like, he looks real slow. I kind of wonder if he actually can stick in center anymore. And I wonder if they need to sort of, make El Monte that guy in center getting more ABs. His plate appearances have been outstanding. He looks, sort of significantly better offensively than they could have expected, and hopefully they ride that for the time being. Brantley, yeah, he's digging out that curveball. He has the most beautiful swing when he connects on a hanger of anyone I've ever seen, because he just hangs back and then drives the barrel head through that hanger, and his whole body turns with such beautiful chain. in terms of the kinetic chain. Is however you want to call it, it looks perfect, and I think that's really positive. So what do you think about tomorrow's matchup? We got Lance McCullers on the mound against Trevor Bauer.
I don't know. I mean, I think that it'll be fun. We're both going to be there. So I don't know. McCullers is a good pitcher. I'm innately curious about guys about Trevor Bauer in particular, because last year his trend towards that two-seamer and his fixation almost on trying to become the Corey Kluber, maybe another Corey Kluber last year was very interesting to me. Where to the point where he's spending thousands of hours watching every Corey Kluber pitch. I'm hoping to see that start to translate this year. It's a game that I would love to win because that puts Kluber on the mound on Thursday. McCullers is a solid pitcher is the problem, and we're running into some bad matchups as we run into the top end of the Astros rotation while our top end is just pitched over the weekend. So unfortunately, we don't get to see Kluber and Carrasco kind of early in this series, but I don't know. Until a guy like Bauer can showcase consistency from start to start and move the ball in the zone the way that a guy like Kluber does. I'm not asking too much. I don't have any faith in him whatsoever, other than the fact that he can log in a ton of innings and he can sometimes run into some really good games. So I don't know, Mike. I would like to see the competitive nature of Trevor Bauer come out tomorrow and him pitch a really nice game, giving us a shot to win the series. I just don't have a lot of faith in it. That being said, the Indians' offense shut down a bit tonight. Hopefully we can wake that up a little bit tomorrow. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I mean, aside from the fact that we're both going to be there, and I can't wait to taste some. This will be my first game, so I'm pretty excited about it. So I don't know if anyone is listening to this. Find me. I'll be roaming around probably at the porch.
Yeah, we'll too. We'll be hanging out. We'll be all over the place. I think I'm positive about. It's fine. It's just another pitching matchup. Bauer has really good stuff. He can show up and be really good. He can show up and not. Like you said, he's going to log a ton of innings. Thankfully, most of Houston's good hitters are right-handed hitters, in my opinion. I think Altuve and Correa are their toughest hitters.
If Altuve plays.
That's a big if. And on the other side, obviously, I mean, that lineup just packs a wall up either way. I mean, you have Gurriel, you have Beltran, you have so much talent. Bregman is a wonderful talent as well, and George Springer even. So, we'll see what sort of health they have and what sort of lineup they bring tomorrow. But I think it's a pretty neutral matchup. Indians at home. Facing McCullers. The next thing, just wanted to highlight before we hop off, minor league performances. Jim and I just want to sort of pop on one whenever we talk about the big league club. But tonight, one guy I've been talking about a lot, Thomas Pannone, went only 4 innings in A+, striking out 9, pulled for pitch count reasons, didn't give up any runs. 9 strikeouts in 4 innings, absolute blast. His stuff is really playing up, and I think he could be in AA before you know it. So he's someone to pay attention to. And, hey, Greg Allen's making a ton of contact.
Yeah, that 2 for 2 today, 2 RBIs. I got hit by a pitch as well. I think the watch there, though, in Akron, Mike, is right now we've got Mejia at 0 for 4. I don't know. We're probably not going to be on air. There's 1 out, runners on second and third, and they're at the bottom of the lineup. So he might not even get another at bat, which would end his 13-game hit streak. Going back to last year, his 21-game hit streak, if you count the 8 at the end of the game there. The game I want to focus on, Mike, is the Columbus game. Is Yandy Diaz makes his debut as the leadoff hitter for Columbus. Boy, they sure seem concerned about his swing plane, don't they? A lot of talk about his swing plane. Michael Brantley coming out and sounding like an old stooge saying, the heck with swing plane. I kind of agree with him, but it did sound kind of sound like he was a 65-year-old journalist. I'll let you talk about that in a second, but Diaz goes 2 for 3 tonight. Naquin goes 2 for 4. He's actually hitting the ball. Bradley Zimmer goes 3 for 3 with a walk. No strikeouts. So some interesting stuff going on there in Columbus. I don't know, and a guy like Plutko was on there. Armstrong pitched today and gave up a ton of runs. What are your thoughts on Yandy Diaz hitting leadoff?
It's a blast. I think also really interesting is he played left field tonight. So that's sort of even more exciting because I think Showing Giovanni Urshela priority over Yandy Diaz at a position is really interesting. I think this is more, we're getting ready for Yandy Diaz like 5 days a week utility guy. So, be ready for that.
Well, and is the priority center fielder Tyler Naquin, since he's in center and Bradley Zimmer's in right?
He's been alternating with Zimmer, right? Like they've alternated a couple of games, but I think that's also something really interesting to watch in terms of the balance. And, that whole AAA team has become really interesting because I think Richie Schaefer's become a really interesting sort of like rebuild project. So you have Diaz, Naquin, Schaefer, Zimmer, and I guess if you're interested in bad middle infielders who are better than Michael Martinez, Ronnie Rodriguez, and Eric Gonzalez.
I'm impressed that you mentioned Ronnie Rodriguez first. I give you props.
Me gusta.
All right. We'll wrap things up there. It should be a fun series. My plan is to be at the next 2 games, so hopefully I'll be there to see Kluber pitch on Thursday night. Hopefully I'll be there tomorrow. Mike will be there as well. Who knows who we'll bump into. Let us know what you think about these gamers. We're going to try to do these mics during Mike's Gamer and during my Gamer. We'll try to do them as much as possible. The key is that you listen to them. So please leave some comments on the site. Please leave some comments at YouTube. Let us know what you think. If you like it, if you want us to change something, if you want us to focus on something, let us know. We certainly can do that. This is our first volley into this and our first foray. I will try to give you a little bit more statistical outlook on the games as we kind of go through these. And let's be honest. I mean, gamers aren't fun. This is Mike and my way of trying to make them a little more fun than just kind of plopping down the same old that you see at every other site. So another WFNY exclusive here. We're going to try something new. Go figure. All right. With that being said, any last thoughts, Mike? Anything you want to plug, push? Namina's got something coming out that he's had a lot of fun doing and has really blossomed into this massive idea from this little seed idea and a little DM conversation we were having.
Yeah, I would plug Nam's Top 10 Indians piece. I think we brought the whole site together, sort of ranked them, and I think there are some really fun, arguments, and it shows how talented the Indians' top 10 is, I think, more than anything else. So I think that's definitely worth reading. That'll be out in the next couple of days. But other than that, it's a wrap, man. I'm ready to go. All
right, let's wrap this thing up. I mean, this was faster than a Dallas Keuchel start against the Cleveland Indians. I'll leave it there. I can't get any better than that. All right, on to the next.